Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Dear friends, every moment of suffering we experience in life carries a deeper meaning. Looking back on those times, some may feel regret, others remorse, and some may smile because they overcame them. Although hardships and struggles will eventually pass, the most important thing is what we learn from those moments. Let's listen to the following 11 meaningful stories about family love to reflect on and cherish the bonds of love and care around us. Story 1: A Distant Memory. Now, in a life of abundance, Lynn suddenly recalls her mother and her hometown, filled with memories of old but warm days. The sounds of New Year's Eve firecrackers and cheerful laughter seem to have faded, leaving only a distant memory deeply etched in her mind. Her mother met her father through a relative's introduction. At the time, her mother had just turned 18, while her father was a young man who had finished high school and was learning the trade of mechanical work. It was a period when society had just emerged from the subsidy era, and everything was difficult. Lynn's father's family had farmland, gardens, and was well educated. That was why her mother said yes, hoping for a life that, while not rich, would be simple and peaceful. That year, her mother became a bride. She thought her new life would be a peaceful haven, but on her wedding day, the ceremonial wine glass shattered to pieces, as if foreshadowing a life filled with sorrow ahead. Her mother gave birth to Lynn, then her younger brother 2 years later. In those early years, their small family was filled with laughter, as they had both a son and daughter, a complete blessing. Yet, after just 3 short years, her mother's happiness began to slip away. Her father returned after finishing his training, but he brought not hope, but misfortune. He was no longer diligent, he neither worked nor opened a workshop as expected. Instead, he drowned himself in alcohol and gambling. Their family's assets slowly disappeared, and all the burdens fell onto her mother's shoulders. Her mother became the pillar of the family, taking on any job she could to support 2 children and an alcoholic husband. Sometimes she worked in the fields, other times as a construction laborer, or she caught crabs and collected scrap to sell. Her frail figure grew thinner, her health deteriorated, and illness set in. But through it all, her mother never stopped worrying about Lynn and her younger brother. Even when beaten by her father, her mother endured it in silence. When Lynn and her brother slept, she would sit in the kitchen and cry alone. Perhaps, more than once, she thought about divorce, but out of love for her children and compassion for her husband's family, she chose to persevere and carry on. Though poor, her mother was determined to give Lynn a proper education. On the day Lynn passed the university entrance exam, her mother shed tears of joy, knowing full well that she would have to work even harder. But that joy was short-lived. One winter day, while Lynn was away studying, a sudden stroke took her mother from this world. Lynn made it home in time to see her mother one last time, as she clung to her final moments of life. Her mother looked at Lynn, tears brimming in her eyes, before quietly passing away in the arms of her family. That afternoon, the small village fell into silence, the fields blanketed in mourning. The funeral procession was unexpectedly large, with even strangers shedding tears. Her mother had lived a life of hardship and struggle, but she left behind a legacy of love, compassion, and profound respect in the hearts of those she touched. Lynn lost her mother before she had the chance to show her gratitude, before a single day of being able to care for her. Now, Lynn has a house and a stable job, but her heart is forever filled with one longing: to share one more meal with her mother, to see her smile, and to hear her voice at the family table on a lunar New Year's Day. Her mother's life, filled with sacrifice and boundless love, became the motivation for Lynn to live and keep moving forward. Every spring, as the new year arrives, Lynn's heart still yearns for her mother's presence, but now it remains only a distant memory, one filled with love, warmth, and the tender smile of the most wonderful mother in the world. Story 2: The Love of Grandparents. On a late winter afternoon, a 76-year-old woman lay on her bed, her distant gaze fixed on the sunset sinking beyond the horizon. Feeling the frailty of her body, she thought, "It's close now. Perhaps I have only a day or 2 left." Memories of the years spent with her husband flooded back, tender, simple, yet filled with struggles. In her youth, she was the most beautiful woman in the village, with countless matchmakers coming to her door. But her heart belonged to a scholarly teacher, a man whose refined demeanor and glasses gave him an intellectual air. A brief encounter on a village path, a single look from him, had made her heart tremble. Yet fate, it seemed, had other plans. That year, her father was saved from danger by a stranger. The young man not only helped her family, but gradually became a companion to them. Though his appearance was unpolished, he was diligent, skillful, and deeply responsible. As time passed, her parents chose him to be their son-in-law, leaving her love story with the teacher unfinished. 3 months later, when the teacher returned to the village, he could only see her dressed in a vibrant red wedding gown. After that, he vanished from her life. She and the young man settled into their life together, enduring countless storms, natural disasters, reforms, and the most difficult years. Yet, through it all, they stood by each other, relied on one another, raised their children, and built a home. As the years passed, they both grew old. To her, he was the devoted man who had always put the family first. She remembered the time their second son struggled to pay school fees. Quietly, her husband had sold his blood to get the money. When she discovered the bruises on his arm, her heart wrenched with pain. This old man, she thought, a lifetime of sacrifice for the family, yet he has never once complained. Though they lived together, the two rarely spoke much, yet their silence carried a profound connection. On peaceful afternoons, they would sit side by side, hand in hand, their mere presence enough for each other. That afternoon, she looked at him and softly asked, "Dear, if there is a next life, would you still want to be my husband?" He paused for a moment, then smiled gently, "I'm not sure. If there is a next life, I'd want to be a rich man, so you can live in comfort. But if I'm still poor like this, I'd rather stay near your house, watching you from afar. Just knowing you're happy would be enough for me." She laughed through tear-filled eyes. "You silly old man, why stay near my house if you're not going to do anything?" He looked at her with tender eyes and replied, "Nothing much, just to be a teacher." She froze. The memory of her first love came rushing back, and in that moment, she understood, the man who had walked with her through this lifetime was the one who loved her the most. Choking back tears, she whispered, "Dear, I'm about to go. Hold me, please." He slowly stood up and gently held her in his arms. She whispered softly, "Dear, let's be husband and wife again in the next life." When their granddaughter returned from school, she was surprised to see her grandparents embracing each other, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. But as she approached, she realized that they had both passed away, peacefully, in each other's arms. Their life together had no grand gestures, nor did it need flowery words. Yet their love, expressed through sacrifice, companionship, and shared moments, became the most beautiful declaration of love. True love is not about fiery passion. It is found in simplicity, endurance, and completeness in every moment spent together. Story 3: Living honestly is true wisdom. 1. Grandfather, the teacher of simplicity and honesty. Khan's grandfather lived alone in the countryside, where the lush green fields and small rivers were his lifelong companions. His life was simple, humble, and deeply rooted in traditional values. For him, outward show was never as important as a sincere heart. He often said, "True wisdom lies not in being cunning but in being honest. Living truthfully is the wisest way to live." This teaching was not some lofty theory, but illustrated through simple stories in daily life. One time, he told a story about a restaurant owner in the village. At first, the man gave his restaurant a fancy name to attract customers. But when he failed to maintain the quality of the food as promised, customers gradually stopped coming. Grandfather said, "A name doesn't matter as much as keeping your promise to customers. People don't come for the name, they come to fill their stomachs and trust." On another occasion, he took me to the market to sell some vegetables from our garden. When an elderly woman unknowingly overpaid, Grandfather immediately called her back, returned the extra money, and said, "The money earned through honesty is the most valuable money of all." These small actions left a deep impression on us, teaching that sincerity and honesty are not just a way of living but the foundation for building trust, the most important element in any relationship or endeavor. As we grew older, grandfather's lessons became even more profound. In a world full of temptations and competition, he reminded us, "You may lose many things, but never lose the trust of others. It is like a mirror, once broken, it can never be restored to its original state." Grandfather was not just a guardian of traditions, he was our first teacher who imparted invaluable lessons about the power of simplicity and honesty in life. Over time, those lessons became precious tools, lighting the path as we grew and faced the challenges of adulthood. Story 3: Living Honestly is True Wisdom. 1. Grandfather, the teacher of simplicity and honesty. Khan's grandfather lived alone in the countryside, where the lush green fields and small rivers were his lifelong companions. His life was simple, humble, and deeply rooted in traditional values. For him, outward show was never as important as a sincere heart. He often said, "True wisdom lies not in being cunning but in being honest. Living truthfully is the wisest way to live." This teaching was not some lofty theory, but illustrated through simple stories in daily life. One time, he told a story about a restaurant owner in the village. At first, the man gave his restaurant a fancy name to attract customers. But when he failed to maintain the quality of the food as promised, customers gradually stopped coming. Grandfather said, "A name doesn't matter as much as keeping your promise to customers. People don't come for the name, they come to fill their stomachs and trust." On another occasion, he took me to the market to sell some vegetables from our garden. When an elderly woman unknowingly overpaid, Grandfather immediately called her back, returned the extra money, and said, "The money earned through honesty is the most valuable money of all." These small actions left a deep impression on us, teaching that sincerity and honesty are not just a way of living but the foundation for building trust, the most important element in any relationship or endeavor. As we grew older, Grandfather's lessons became even more profound. In a world full of temptations and competition, he reminded us, "You may lose many things, but never lose the trust of others. It is like a mirror, once broken, it can never be restored to its original state." Grandfather was not just a guardian of traditions, he was our first teacher who imparted invaluable lessons about the power of simplicity and honesty in life. Over time, those lessons became precious tools, lighting the path as we grew and faced the challenges of adulthood. 2. Virtue, conduct, speech, and integrity, a lesson from a life partner. Khan brought 2 female friends to visit his grandfather, each on different occasions. The first was Lin, a beautiful and intelligent girl, but one who was sharp-tongued and somewhat lacking in grace when interacting with others. The second was Tao, whose appearance was unremarkable but who was gentle, thoughtful, and always able to make those around her feel at ease. With his life experience and keen perception, Grandfather quietly observed both girls without offering any immediate remarks. He allowed their smallest actions to reveal their true selves, while also letting Khan recognize the differences on his own. The first visit, Lin's story. Lin was introduced to Khan's grandfather on a quiet weekend morning. Upon arriving, she expressed admiration for the large ancestral house and the spacious garden. However, during the meal, Lin only picked the dishes she liked without offering food to the grandfather or paying much attention to proper table manners. When the grandfather invited her to join in conversations about family and life, her responses were indifferent, as if she wasn't truly interested. At one point, Lin suggested turning the ancestral house into a heritage homestay to generate income. Her remark brought only a faint smile from the grandfather, but his deep, reflective eyes revealed a trace of sadness. To him, the ancestral home was not just a place to live, it was the soul of the family, a sanctuary for preserving traditions that should not be commercialized. Later, when invited to sing along with Khan and his grandfather, Lin declined. Instead, she focused on adjusting her lipstick, seemingly detached from the warm family atmosphere. Over time, differences in values and perspectives led to frequent arguments between Lin and Khan. Eventually, after a year of dating, they decided to part ways. The second visit, Tao's story. Sometime later, on another quiet weekend morning, Khan visited his grandfather again, but this time he brought along a young woman named Tao. As soon as they arrived, Tao greeted the grandfather politely and offered to help with any household chores. Noticing that the grandfather was busy watering the garden, Tao kindly offered to assist or prepare the meal instead. The three of them ended up cooking together, filling the house with cheerful laughter. During the meal, Tao sat with her back straight and her legs neatly together, maintaining a composed and graceful posture. She politely invited the grandfather and Khan to eat first before she began, and she thoughtfully served rice and added food to their bowls. These small yet considerate gestures brought a smile of satisfaction to the grandfather's face. After the meal, without waiting to be asked, Tao cleared the table, carefully covered the leftover food, and washed the dishes meticulously. She also inquired about the grandfather's life living alone, expressing genuine concern for his health and well-being, especially during times when he might be unwell. Sometime later, when Khan visited his grandfather alone, the old man gently shared his thoughts about the two women. Without criticizing or directly comparing them, he softly said, "Virtue, conduct, speech, and integrity are not distant ideals confined to books or theory. They are reflected in the small, everyday actions of a person, how they treat others, especially in the simplest moments. It is through these small actions that one's character is revealed." He then explained the qualities Tao had demonstrated. Virtue, this is the ability to manage household responsibilities and support family life. Tao showed this through her involvement in preparing the meal, from picking vegetables and cooking to cleaning up afterward. Conduct, it is not just physical beauty but also grace, composure, and thoughtfulness in one's actions, such as how one sits, eats, and engages in conversation. Tao did not need to boast, yet she exuded gentleness and charm. Speech, this is about speaking with respect, moderation, and care for others. Tao always spoke softly, addressed the grandfather politely, and asked thoughtful questions that showed genuine concern. Integrity, it is the kindness, compassion, and sincere care one shows to others. Tao expressed this by worrying about the grandfather living alone and willingly helping without waiting to be asked. The grandfather concluded, "Tao has shown all the virtue, conduct, speech, and integrity qualities essential in a woman. These do not need to be grand or perfect, they simply need to be expressed sincerely through daily actions, proving one's true worth." The grandfather's story imparted a profound lesson. When choosing a life partner, one should not rely solely on fleeting emotions or first impressions. It is important to observe the small yet sincere actions that reveal the person's true character and values. A good life partner is not just someone who walks with you through love, but also someone willing to share, care for, and build a family with you. Qualities like Song, Dung, Gong, and Han are not outdated concepts confined to books, they exist all around us in everyday life. If we pay attention, we will recognize them in the simplest moments. 3. The lesson of community bonds. Whenever there was a wedding or a funeral in the village, Khan's grandfather was always the first to offer his help. To him, it wasn't just a duty but also a source of joy, an opportunity to live in harmony with his neighbors. He once told Khan, "Living in a village, you may not be rich in wealth, but you must be rich in compassion. The bonds of community are priceless treasures that money cannot buy." During such occasions, he would teach Khan to understand the struggles of rural life. He showed Khan how to help with preparations, from setting up tents to cooking meals and caring for guests who had traveled from afar. However, he also expressed disapproval of certain habits that eroded the core values of such ceremonies. He once recounted a story of a family in the village who hosted a wedding. They tried to make it extravagant, inviting an overwhelming number of guests just to gain prestige, but ended up drowning in debt. Grandfather said, "You see, a wedding is not for showing off, it's a time for the family to bond and receive love from others. Whatever you do must suit your circumstances, don't bring hardship upon yourself for the sake of vanity or pride." Grandfather always acted according to his principles, helping sincerely without being bound by greed or reputation. On one occasion, someone asked him to contribute a large sum of money for a village festival. He tactfully declined, saying, "I can offer my labor and effort sincerely, but if I'm asked to give beyond my means, I fear I'll lose the honesty in my intentions." His actions reflected not only his sincerity but also a living example of staying true to one's core values. He often reminded Khan, "True courtesy is not about appearances, it lies in the heart when you treat others. When helping someone, do it with genuine intent, not for praise or rewards." The lessons from his grandfather taught Khan the true meaning of community bonds. It's not just about sharing material things, but also about empathy, understanding, and building connections through small, thoughtful actions. 4. The final advice. Finally, grandfather emphasized a lesson that I will always remember. Living honestly doesn't mean being naive, it is profound wisdom. When society becomes lacking in trust, it is your honesty that will set you apart and help you succeed. His words felt like the distillation of a lifetime of experience. He understood that in a world where trust is becoming increasingly rare, honesty is not just a virtue, it is a strategy, a pathway to building a sustainable career and lasting relationships. He recounted moments in his life when he faced difficult choices. There were times when a small lie or bending the truth could have brought him greater benefits. But he chose not to do it. He said, "When you remain honest, not only do others trust you, but you also preserve the peace in your heart. That is the most precious asset, one that no one can take away from you." Story 4. Two good people, yet an unfulfilled marriage. Ma was a good woman who worked tirelessly to maintain her family. Since childhood, she had been accustomed to waking up at 5 a.m. every day. She always prepared a steaming pot of porridge for her husband, Hong, who suffered from stomach issues and could only eat porridge in the morning. At the same time, Ma cooked dry rice for her children, believing that children needed hearty meals to be strong and study well. Every week, my son dried the mats, meticulously scrubbed the basins until they shone like mirrors, and wiped the floors at night until they were spotless enough to walk barefoot without gathering any dust. Despite Mai's dedication as a wife, Hung never saw her as his ideal life partner. As I grew up, I often heard my father, Hung, complain about his loneliness and his feelings of being misunderstood in the marriage. Hung was a model man. He didn't smoke or drink, always went to work on time, and spent time with his family. He enjoyed playing chess, practicing calligraphy, and reading books. To me, he was a wonderful father, protective and wise in raising his children. Yet, for Mai, he was not a perfect husband. Their daughter, Lon, grew up haunted by her parents' marriage, often wondering, why can't two good people have a good marriage? When Lon married Nam, she began to understand. At first, Lon was just like her mother, trying to do everything, cleaning the house, cooking meals, and managing the household. Yet, neither she nor Nam felt truly happy. One day, while Lon was busy mopping the floor, Nam said, "Honey, take a break and listen to music with me." Frustrated, Lon snapped, "Can't you see I haven't finished cleaning the floor yet?" As soon as she spoke, Lon was stunned. She realized she was repeating the very same dynamic she had seen in her parents' marriage. At that moment, Lon decided to change. She asked Nam, "What do you truly need?" Nam looked at her and replied, "I need you here with me, listening to music. It's okay if the house is a little dirty. We can hire help. What I need is your companionship." Lon realized that, like her mother, she had been spending too much time on what she thought was important but neglecting what Nam truly needed. From then on, they began sharing their needs with one another. Lon created a list of things Nam desired, and he did the same for her. Small gestures, like listening to music together, greeting each other with a morning hug, or simply listening without offering advice, brought them closer and helped them understand each other better. These seemingly small needs became the foundation for a more fulfilling and loving marriage. Whenever conflicts arose, they would take a walk in the botanical garden where their love had first begun. There, they found peace and rekindled their affection. Lon realized that a happy marriage doesn't come from doing everything you think is right, but from doing what your partner truly needs. I believe that if we listen and respond to our partner's needs, a happy and fulfilling marriage is something we can all achieve. Story 5: Tears for My Father. My mother passed away when I was born, leaving my father alone to raise me. To me, my mother's death always felt like a cruel trade by fate. My father, frail, hardworking, and solitary for so many years, never once complained or gave up. He lived well, not just for his own life, but for my mother's share too. On the day my wife gave birth to our first son, Mo, I brought my father to the city to stay with us. For the first time as a father, looking at my adorable baby boy, I realized even more about love and responsibility. My wife's family was large, and everyone adored little Mo, taking turns holding him. But when my father reached out to hold his grandson, my mother-in-law hesitated and exclaimed, "Oh no! Grandpa's hands are so rough, they might scratch the baby's delicate skin." That comment left my father embarrassed. He mumbled something about washing his hands and quietly left for the back of the house. I followed him and saw him scrubbing his rough, calloused hands raw. I approached him and said softly, "Dad, let me help you wash your hands." He shook his head and replied, "Don't be silly, son. When you were little, I washed your hands and feet. You don't need to do this now." I ignored him and gently took his hands. His hands were a map of hardship, chapped, rough, and scarred with patches of irritation. He admitted he had tried to repair my broken yard with cement and had suffered an allergic reaction, causing severe damage to his hands. Watching my father's frail figure walk back inside, I felt my heart tighten. My father never said much, but his actions overflowed with love. He quietly washed his grandson's diapers, boiled herbal water to help my wife recover, and took care of the smallest details without being asked. He never once held Mo, probably out of embarrassment about his rough hands, but I knew he adored his grandson with all his heart. One morning, while I was away on a business trip, I received a frantic call from my wife. "Come home immediately. Dad's in the hospital." I rushed back and learned he had slipped while standing on a chair, hanging diapers for Mo. Luckily, the injury wasn't serious, but the doctor advised us to be mindful of his emotional well-being. While searching through his bag for clothes, I found a small, worn notebook. Curious, I opened it and began to read. "So, my grandson has been born for a week. Seeing my son so happy, I realize I've grown old. I feel joy and sadness at the same time. I want so much to hold Mo in my arms, but I don't dare." The shaky, overlapping lines were filled with love and loneliness. He had written about my mother, about the difficult days of raising me alone. "My dear wife, rest assured, I'll live well and raise our son. I'll live for both of us." I read on, my tears blurring the ink-stained words. My father had hidden all his emotions, all his struggles, pouring them into these pages instead. I closed the notebook and held it close, my heart overwhelmed with regret. That day at the hospital, I hugged my father and wept openly. Ignoring the curious stares of those around us, I sobbed, "Dad, I'm sorry. I forgot how much you sacrificed for me." He patted my shoulder gently and replied in his familiar voice, "Silly boy, I'm still here. Where else would I go?" Looking at him, I realized no matter how much I tried, I could never repay the infinite love my father had given me. Becoming a father myself made me understand that a parent's love is boundless, something children can never fully repay. Cherish your parents while you still can. To them, no matter how grown, successful, or accomplished you may be, you will always be their little child, someone they will forever love and protect. Story 6: A Mother-in-Law's Nagging, a Revelation of Past Life Karma. In life, conflicts between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law are common, often leading to prolonged tension and disharmony. But are these conflicts merely coincidental? Or do they stem from profound karmic ties that few would imagine? This story took place in September 2016 in Shanghai, when Kim Dong and his wife, DM Lu, sought out Kwa Kan, a lay practitioner said to possess the ability to see past lives through the heavenly eye. The third eye. Kim Dong and DM Lu had previously enjoyed a blissful life, 2 obedient daughters, a prosperous family, and a shared belief in Buddhist teachings. However, their happiness was shattered when DM Lu was diagnosed with malignant cancer. She had already undergone a mastectomy, yet the disease recurred and metastasized. Doctors predicted that she had no more than 3 months to live. In desperation, they sought Kwa Kan to uncover the cause of their misfortune. During the conversation, Kwa Kan unexpectedly asked DM Lu, "Do you have a very strained relationship with your mother-in-law, to the point that you don't even want to see or talk to her?" Tears streamed down DM Lee's face as she admitted that her relationship with her mother-in-law was terrible. Her mother-in-law constantly criticized and nitpicked her, causing her great distress. As a result, she had avoided living with or engaging with her. Kwa Kan then revealed the karmic connection from their past lives. During the Tang dynasty, DM Lu and Kim Dong were wealthy young noblemen who lived indulgent yet devout lives. On one hunting trip, Kim Dong, in his past incarnation, saved a deer's life after DM Lu attempted to kill it. That deer, through the cycle of many lifetimes, was reborn as DM Lee's mother-in-law in the present. Kwa Kan explained that in her past life, DM Lee's mother-in-law bore a deep gratitude toward Kim Dong for saving her life. This gratitude manifested in her profound love and overbearing concern for her son in this life. However, in that same past life, the mother-in-law had once been DM Lee's subordinate and had endured mistreatment and harsh words from her. The resentment she carried from that lifetime led to her nitpicking and criticizing DM Lu in this one. Kwa Kan said to DM Lu, "Nothing happens by chance. What you are experiencing is the karmic result of what you sowed in a past life. If you truly wish to change your fate, let go of resentment, sincerely repent, and treat your mother-in-law with love and compassion." DM Lu understood and resolved to change. She began reading Buddhist scriptures daily, practiced vegetarianism, and performed acts of charity. Most importantly, she humbly apologized to her mother-in-law and worked to mend their relationship. Over time, DM Lee's health improved significantly, defying the doctor's grim prognosis. Kim Dong and DM Lu decided to invite his parents to live with them, putting an end to years of misunderstanding and conflict. DM Lee's story is a clear testament to the law of karma. Everything we do today shapes the life we will experience tomorrow. If we can repent sincerely and change from within, life will reward us with miraculous transformations. Story 7. Marriage is more than a promise. Marriage is not just a bond sealed by a promise, but a testament to true love, a love that accepts flaws, overcomes hardships, and cherishes even the smallest moments. Love through the years. In a small town, Mr. Kwong, now in his 80s, has spent the last 5 years visiting Mrs. Noyet, his wife suffering from dementia, at the nursing home every morning. When asked, "She hasn't recognized you in years. Why do you keep coming back?" Mr. Kwong simply smiled. "Yes, she doesn't recognize me, but I recognize her. That is enough." His love for Mrs. Noyet transcends memory. It is a promise to his own heart to love her not just for yesterday, but for today and tomorrow. Keeping a promise. The story of Lu Din Tuk, a Confucian scholar from the Northern Song dynasty, exemplifies loyalty to a marriage vow. Before achieving prominence, he was betrothed to a girl from his village. However, after passing the imperial exams and gaining favor with Su Dompa, Lu Din Tuk's future seemed bright. Tragically, his fiancée fell ill, became blind, and her impoverished family no longer dared to mention marriage. Friends advised him to marry her younger sister to preserve ties with the family, but Lu Din Tuk refused. "Years ago, I pledged my heart to her. To betray that promise would mean I am unworthy of being a decent man." To him, marriage was not just a choice, but a matter of responsibility and ethics. People may age, and appearances may fade, but trust and mutual respect must endure a lifetime. Modern marriages, timeless values. Today, marriage is often viewed pragmatically. Some believe incompatibility is grounds for divorce, and others normalize infidelity or cohabitation without commitment. Yet, despite societal changes, the core values of marriage remain unchanged. Marriage is not merely a romantic tale, but a journey of sacrifice, sharing, and responsibility. The vows made before family, friends, or divine witnesses are not mere formalities, but commitments to a lifelong bond. For richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, we vow to walk together, sharing blessings and enduring hardships. Ancient values. In both Eastern and Western traditions, marriage has always been seen as sacred. Ancient wisdom held that marriage was a divine union, a vow made under the heavens. Divorce was not only seen as irresponsible but as a betrayal of sacred promises. Modern life may tempt people to follow fleeting emotions, but this does not diminish the value of marriage. Instead, it serves as a reminder that maintaining happiness requires tolerance, rationality, and sacrifice. Marriage is not a trap for love, but a connection of two souls committed to understanding and companionship. Amid challenges, the promise to love, respect, and care for one another becomes the guiding light to happiness. Cherish love the right way, for it is the foundation of a lasting marriage and a meaningful life. Story 8. The Regret of a Divorced Man. At a small gathering, my friend Min, holding a glass of wine, spoke through his intoxicated haze. Marriage is not the grave of love. We dig our own graves when we ourselves destroy love and marriage. His face was flushed, his smile tinged with loneliness and disappointment. Just a year ago, at a similar party, Min had proudly declared, "I finally got divorced. I'm free now." Min's ex-wife, Lon, had been described by him as dull, constantly nagging, hot-tempered, and overly controlling. Min used to say she lacked all the virtues a woman should have. Throughout their marriage, he never brought her to meet friends or family. But now, with Lon remarried, when people teased him about it, Min drank another glass, covered his face, and cried bitterly. "I used to think she couldn't do anything right and would never live well without me. But now I realize that I was the one who destroyed our marriage." His sobs left everyone in silence. Min admitted that relationships often fall apart not because someone is inherently bad, but because of selfishness and indifference. He shared, "Somewhere along the way, I only saw our flaws. I spoke coldly, criticized her constantly, and forgot how much she sacrificed for me. I regret that I was so stingy with compliments, treating everything she did as if it were expected. Love, no matter how deep, will run dry under neglect and thoughtlessness." Min continued, "I think everyone wants to feel loved and appreciated, but I made her feel exhausted and disappointed. By the time I realized this, it was already too late." He explained that when we live with someone for a long time, we tend to vent our worst emotions on our partners while showing patience and kindness to strangers. Min ended his confession with a painful realization. "The hurtful words I said, the unnecessary anger, all of it slowly wore down Lan's heart. I no longer have the chance to make it right, but I hope none of you make the same mistake as I did." After the party, Min's words echoed in my mind. Marriage is not where love dies, it is where love must be nurtured every single day. Words of criticism, fits of anger, these can destroy the foundation of a relationship. But understanding and compassion have the power to mend it. Remember this, love doesn't appear out of nowhere, nor does it simply vanish. Don't just focus on your partner's flaws, appreciate the good they bring into your life. Add a little gentleness, a little respect. Don't let regret, like Min's, become the lesson you learned too late. Story 9. The husband's reaction after the babysitter burned their child touched the wife's heart. The safety of young children is always a mother's top priority, especially in their early years. It's understandable, then, that Hoa, a young mother, was furious when her 7-month-old daughter, Mai, got burned due to the babysitter's carelessness. However, a few words from her husband changed her perspective, teaching her the value of forgiveness and compassion. On December 8, 2017, the tranquility of Hoa's small family in Hanoi was disrupted. While playing with baby Mai, the babysitter accidentally knocked over the lid of a thermal flask, causing hot water to spill onto Mai's arm. Mai's screams echoed through the house, shocking everyone. Immediately, Hoa's husband, Hung, rushed over to provide first aid. He poured cold water over their daughter's hand to ease the pain, drenching both himself and Mai in the process. Then, without hesitation, he took Mai to the hospital for treatment. At that moment, Hoa was overcome with anger. The babysitter, with trembling hands, tried to comfort Mai but dared not touch her. In the cold silence and icy stare of Hoa, the babysitter could only bow her head and apologize. On the way to the hospital, Hoa's mind was filled with fury and resentment. How could my daughter suffer such pain because of her carelessness, she wondered bitterly. At the hospital, after the doctors had bandaged Mai's burns, Hung gently held their daughter and turned to Hoa. When we get home, make sure to check if she's okay. Hoa was stunned. Why should I ask about her? It's her fault, she snapped. Hung calmly replied. Yes, it was her fault, but she's human, too. The boiling water might have burned her as well. We haven't even asked if she's all right. His words were like a wake-up call for Hoa. On the way home, she started to rethink everything. She realized that in her anger, she had forgotten patience and empathy, qualities she always prided herself on. The babysitter had only been working for them for less than a week, likely still unfamiliar with the household routine. While her mistake was severe, the remorse and confusion she showed proved it was not intentional. Thanks to her husband's calm demeanor and thoughtful reminder, Hoa decided to shift her perspective. Instead of letting resentment take over, she chose to give the babysitter a second chance to make amends. Hoa later shared this story on her Facebook page, hoping it would inspire others to practice compassion and understanding in difficult situations. In an update, she revealed that baby Mai was recovering quickly and that the babysitter had become significantly more careful in her work. Under Hoa's post, countless people left messages wishing Mai a speedy recovery and commending Hoa for finding the strength to forgive. A mother who had once been consumed with anger had now learned a valuable lesson. Forgiveness not only brings peace to others, but also liberates oneself from negative thoughts. Story 10: The Torn Palm Leaf Hat and a Lesson Learned Too Late. In 1972, Mrs. Meng became a daughter-in-law of her husband's family during a time of hardship. Life was difficult back then, and the couple struggled to provide meals for their family. When the state allocated them a house on the outskirts of town, they requested to move out to become self-reliant. Once a pampered young woman, Mrs. Meng had to take on countless jobs to support her 3 children and her husband. She learned to make palm leaf hats from a neighbor, which gave her a small income to improve their living conditions. One day, while buying materials for her hats, she visited her in-laws and was heartbroken to see her mother-in-law wearing a tattered, torn palm leaf hat. 3 days later, Mrs. Meng carefully crafted a beautiful poetry hat and brought it to her mother-in-law as a gift. The old woman beamed with joy, holding the hat and admiring it for a long time. But when Mrs. Meng asked for the old hat strings to replace them, the old woman hesitated, went into the room, climbed up to the attic, and returned empty-handed. "Where's the hat, Mother?" Mrs. Meng asked. "I've stored it on the attic for safekeeping. The old hat still works fine. I'll use this new one when the old one's completely unusable." Mrs. Meng pleaded with her to replace it immediately, but the old woman refused. Out of frustration, Mrs. Meng blurted, "Fine, give it back to me. I'll sell it and bring it back when the old one breaks." Her words made the old woman's face fall. Her eyes turned red, as if she were about to cry, and she silently retreated into her room without another word. When Mrs. Meng left, her mother-in-law didn't see her off or say goodbye, leaving her with a deep sense of regret. 40 years later, the incident seemed forgotten, until one day her son asked her, "Mom, why haven't you used the stove I bought for you? You keep everything unused, choosing instead to use old, broken things." Mrs. Meng explained, "In tough times, I make do with what's still usable to save money for you kids." But her son disagreed. "Then I'll take the stove back and give it to someone else." Those words pierced her heart like a knife. Her face fell, tears welled up, and this time, she couldn't hold back her sobs. She cried bitterly, as if experiencing the same pain her mother-in-law once endured. Days later, she confided in someone. At that moment, I felt humiliated and heartbroken. I've spent my life sacrificing for my children, but when they give me something and I don't use it the way they want, they threaten to take it back. How could that not hurt? That night, she lay awake, unable to sleep. Memories of the old torn hat resurfaced, along with the thoughtless words she had said to her mother-in-law all those years ago. Though she had no malicious intent, she realized that she had caused deep pain. Sitting silently before her family altar, she lit an incense stick and whispered, "Mother, I'm sorry. I made you sad because of that palm leaf hat. Now I understand the pain, and I ask for your forgiveness." She came to realize that what she experienced today was a direct consequence of her actions in the past. As the saying goes, in the past, karma was slow, but nowadays it comes swiftly, like a tethered rope. Mrs. Meng's story reminds us to always be mindful of our words and actions. Even unintended hurtful words can leave scars in someone's heart that may never heal. By the time we understand and feel remorse, it may already be too late. The love parents have for their children is boundless. It's a love we often fail to appreciate when we're young, but time teaches us lessons about empathy and gratitude. Cherish every moment you have with your parents, for no matter how hard we try to repay their love, it may still feel like a ladle of water in a parched, sun-baked field. Story 11: The Last Steamed Bun. In a poor family living in a remote countryside, there were just a mother and her young son who relied on each other to survive. The mother worked tirelessly every day to provide for her son, who was at an age where he needed to study and grow. Though their lives were difficult, they were filled with love and warmth. One day, after a long day of labor, the mother returned home carrying a small steamed bun, the only food she could afford with the little money she had left. She placed the bun on the table and said to her son, "Eat this, dear. You must be hungry today." The boy looked at the steamed bun, then looked up at his mother with shining eyes. "Mom, you eat it. You've been working all day." The mother smiled, patted his head gently, and said, "I'm not hungry. Seeing you eat makes me feel full already." But when the boy stubbornly refused to eat and pushed the bun back toward his mother, she pretended to be upset and raised her voice. "If you don't eat, I'll be really angry." In the end, the boy reluctantly picked up the steamed bun and broke it in half. "Then let's share it, Mom. You eat one half, and I'll eat the other." The small steamed bun was divided into two. Though it wasn't enough to fill their stomachs, they sat together, smiling happily. That night, as the mother held her son in her arms, she thought to herself, "No matter how poor we are, as long as my son grows up healthy and happy, I will be content." Many years later, that little boy had grown into a successful man. Despite his busy life, he never forgot that last steamed bun and the words his mother taught him. In life, sometimes a little sacrifice doesn't mean loss, it allows love to grow and spread even further. Family love doesn't reside in grand gestures or material wealth. It lives in simple, heartfelt actions that come from the soul. Always cherish, love, and care for your family while you still can, for family is the only place that will unconditionally forgive, protect, and embrace you throughout your entire life. Thank you for taking the time to follow this content. If you found it helpful, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring meaningful life lessons together. See you in the next video. Wishing you strength, perseverance, and success in achieving all the goals you aspire to. Goodbye and see you soon.